Okay, the program will begin in 30 seconds. We're very official here.
Didn't it say recording?
There's this a seat up here. I don't know if
Usually it
somebody.
says recording.
A what?
A seat.
Oh,
Oh, you're saving it?
Yeah,
are we good?
Sorry. No problem. I just.
Good to go?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Good afternoon and welcome to the San Mateo Arboretum Society's Sunday seminar. Today's topic is creating beautiful containers for spring with Laurel Nagle. My name is Pat Paquette. I'm a Arboretum volunteer and an education committee member, and Sue Carter is back there, is our program chair for education. The program will last approximately 60 minutes and it will be recorded. In about a few days, you'll get an email with a copy of the recording as well as an evaluation form. We ask the people that are here in person, you have an evaluation form on your chair. If you could fill it out while you're here, that would be great. We really appreciate any feedback that you can give us. And as Laurel said, after each section, we'll take questions. So if you could just hold your questions. A little bit of information about what's going on in the park. Our nursery, although we haven't been open this weekend because of the rain, but we're typically open Saturday, Sunday, 12 to 3. We have lots of great indoor and outdoor plants and really great prices. So if you haven't been, come see us. We should be open next week, hopefully. We don't take, we just take credit cards, by the way, so no cash is accepted. And while you're in the park, check out the rose garden. They've just finished doing the pruning. Archana and Sue head that up. We have a butterfly and hummingbird garden adjacent to the rose garden, 2 demonstration, a sun and shade garden, and we just redid our fairy garden. So check those out. And they're all maintained by Arboretum volunteers. Also, if you're interested, I don't know how many people are members. If you're interested in becoming a member, we have applications in the back, and you get a discount at our nursery of 10%, and a lot of the local nurseries will also give you a discount. So think about it. We have lots of seminars and workshops and things that, and as we were mentioning, the art show will start next weekend. It's Crystal Springs Upland School students, so you might want to check that out. Okay, moving on to our speaker. Laurel Nagle is a professional gardener and owner of Every Bloomin Thing, a subscription container gardening service providing seasonal color to homes and businesses along the peninsula. She's been a master gardener since 2009 and has a landscape architecture degree from UC Berkeley Extension. Laurel has given presentations throughout the Bay Area on various aspects of container gardening, as well as edible gardening, beginner basics, and seasonal planting design. So I'll turn it over to Laurel.
Thank you, and thank you for coming, especially through the rain. So we can start we're going to talk about spring container gardens, but in talking about them for spring, this applies to really any season, but we've tried to make it a focus, and this clicker is not. There we go. Okay, so I've got some spring photos like these. We're not quite spring planting yet, so you have some time. There's 3. Well, let me talk about. I love containers. Actually, I've done borders, but I like containers because, one, you don't have to worry about the soil. You don't have to. You can change them easily. You can move them. Can take them with you if you move. They're just really easy, and they can really be your personality. You may have a very drought tolerant garden or, you know, monochrome. And if you want to add some pops of color, especially in the winter or spring when things are kind of dull, this pots, even in your border, are a great way to do it. There are kind of three sections here. One is preparation, some things you need to know before you even go out the door. We'll talk about sort of the design concepts a little bit so that by the time you go to put everything together or go to the nursery, you know kind of what you want, what you need. So this is the most important thing. Know your microclimate. We're now, I think, zone 10, according to the USDA. We just got upgraded because of climate change. And our summers are a little milder. It's great in that some things that we consider perennials or, I mean, annuals might overwinter, but we also lose out on some things that need that cold rest to bloom really well. So you want to figure out where you're gonna plant your pots. Let's assume front door for this. So are you facing north, south, east, west? You need to see how many hours of sun you get or shade, and it may differ in the summer than the winter. I have clients that face the south, and so in the summer it's actually shady because their overhang makes it all shady. In the winter they get direct sun because of the arch. There are apps, some are free, some are whatever, probably cost money. Usually you can get a free version, which is adequate for you just to see the arc of the sun at any time of the year. You can put in today and then maybe 2 months from now to see, oh, I'm getting more sun or less sun. I use that every time I go to a client. Sometimes clients I've still been going to just to refresh my memory. Oh yeah, this thing really does need some sun and they're not going to have it in a month and it'll fade. I try to plant for at least 3 months of good looking containers. Those apps are also for photographers and other people. That's where the extra expense gets in, blue light, golden light. I don't think you need that. It's just a matter of figuring out the arc and the sun. If you're next to, if you're south or west facing and you're next to stucco or stone, during the day that sun warms up that stone. That actually keeps it warmer at night. So you might be able to put in some tender things earlier in the year than somebody facing east might, or north. And then you want to think about, is it windy? Or, you know, which way the wind comes. Do you have deer and rabbits? That's going to affect what you plant. Foot traffic. You don't want to put a nice, beautiful container by your door and everybody hits it every time they go in and either get scratched. I made that mistake once, or break the blossoms off. So that's important. And then available water, because you're going to have to water this. There's no such thing as no water plants. Even succulents need water. And then maximum weight, if you're going on a balcony or a rooftop. I'm not an engineer, I don't know, but soil that's wet is heavy. Some pots are very heavy. You should know a gallon of water is 8 pounds. Dry soil might take almost a gallon to get it going. Soil might be 5 pounds, pot may be whatever. So you're looking at, I don't even want to give you a range because it depends, but you're looking at a very heavy spot. If you're on the ground, this doesn't matter. Okay, I'm not getting. Okay. This is just an example of sort of what I talked about with the heat and the sun. You can see Okay, well, I was trying to do a pointer. Oh, it works on yours, but not mine?
You have to move it to the right. There you go.
Okay, there we go. So this is the full sun coming on the stone, and then it reflects during the day and night. It also probably dries out those areas. You might need to water a little more often than you think. The other side stays cooler. You don't need to water as often. And if there is a wall of some kind, you do get that little bit of, well, oh, sorry, wall eddy right there. Just something to think about. Okay. Not working. I'm not sure. Okay. Next, you kind of know what your environment is. You're going to think about a container. Maybe you have one, that's fine. But let me just, if you're going to go buy one, give you a few things to think about. There are a wide range of styles. I mean, if you have a formal formal house, you really want to think about architecture, or a cottagey house, or a very modern house. You may want something with angles, you may want something with color, or very classic. And you might consider the colors that are around you. For example, that bottom container there, it's next to brick, and there was a gray beige kind of wall behind it. So those were a good color choice for that house. Pink would have been a bad color choice. I mean, you have a lot of options. Things are pretty flexible there. The different materials can affect not only the weight of the container, but how often you need to water. Terracotta kind of wicks some moisture through it, whereas glazed or plastic holds the water more. You have less of that evaporation. There are plastic ones that are great these days. There are fiberglass or something that's a mix of like concrete, and I think they call it fiberglass and concrete. Some of those are done by some of the trendier big stores that sell containers. They can be great, and they can be lighter weight. They can sometimes get heavy. You really want to check the durability, because I've seen people put a foot through them or sit on them thinking they're sturdy, and they crunch. So that's something to think of. Metal, if you really love metal and you're in a hot, sunny place, you want to line that with either, we use coconut core all down it. That's natural. If you have big panels of styrofoam, or maybe a landscape fabric, because that gets so hot, it will burn the roots. So you definitely want to think about that with metal. Fabric, I don't love, because they don't last very long, and they might be fine for growing potatoes one season, or tomatoes. I know that's when you see them a lot. But even though tomatoes, they need a lot of water, and you lose a lot through that fabric. So, and then self-watering. There are a lot of self-watering brands out there. I have historically not liked them. There are some companies doing some new things. My issue with the traditional ones, and I don't have a picture, but usually there's a plastic, let me do it on this so people at home can see. Let's say this was self-watering, this shape. There'd be a piece, some kind of like piece of plastic shelf here, where the dirt would be from here up, and the water would sit down here. And the idea was that it would somehow wick up. It does to some degree, but if you've got new little, violas or something, the water doesn't quite get up there. So you still have to water, at least in the beginning, if not longer. Second of all, roots always go for the water. And if you have something, violas aren't going to make it all the way down. But if you have a little bush or something in there, or a perennial, once those roots hit that water, they can't breathe. They start to rot and it goes up. And as soon as there's rot, you either have to cut it off. I mean, you have to take the plant out, cut off the rotted part, spray it with hydrogen peroxide or something. But usually you don't know that till the plant's already half dead because you're not seeing the roots. So I know there are new ones where the wicking is closer up. I know other people in this profession, not in this area, but like Seattle or the Midwest, who've tried them and say, once things are established, they're pretty convenient. So I leave that to you. And don't forget the feet. You want your pot to drain. This pot here, and I don't know, I think it's kind of clear, is just sitting on some flagstone, and it rained a couple days before, and there's coal there. Nothing is, stopping it. And still there's a couple inches of water in there. I don't know if you can tell that. So just because your pot's on the ground doesn't mean it's draining. You need a little bit of height. If you don't want to do feet, because sometimes they're wobbly, we go to the, home supply stores and buy it. It's usually bigger than this. It's like 12 by 12 thing of tile, like you might put on your wall or your bathroom. I always buy the cheap ones, about 1/4 of an inch high. And it's better if they're matte or have some texture. I have purchased shiny ones and they're a little slippery. But as long as there's just some little break down there, and these are discreet, you don't really notice them underneath. If you're going to do a saucer, you still want this raised up because the saucer holds water, and it's sort of like with the self-watering. Your roots are going to come down out the pot and rot. Also, if you're going to do saucers because you don't want runoff, you really need to take the water out once it accumulates, and people hate to do that. But you only need 1/4 inch of water for mosquitoes to lay eggs, and we have West Nile disease in this area. So just keep that in mind. We use turkey basters. You could use a rag if there's not a lot. A blower works. Okay, next. Oh, there we go. I put this in. It's not really relevant. Well, it's relevant in that if you do something with it, you have a beautiful container you've had forever and it doesn't have drainage. You can usually drill holes underneath. A lot of these materials, even, well, I wouldn't do glass for a container, but you can drill a hole through. But if you don't want to do that, or you have an indoor one, you don't want it to drain, I suggest, oh, sorry, nope, I made a mistake there. I suggest you here's the pot of your plant. You want to prop it up on some rocks, some old plastic, potting containers, whatever you have, and let the water drain into your non-draining plant pot. The issue with that is you could have a lot of water down there and not know it. And it can smell, it can get into the plant. My preference is that people take this little pot, lift it up, put it in their sink or their bathtub, water it, but most people don't want to do that. So just be very mindful of how much water you need and what's happening in it. But people who just, stick that pot right without the rocks or anything down there, they're just, drowning it eventually. Okay. Next. Okay, so any questions about that so far? No? Okay. All right, good.
I might interject. We have, if you like to use the pot feet, we've got a lot of them for sale.
Oh, there you go. There are really cute pot feet out there.
Yeah.
If you want to do something with personality. Okay, so now this is design, and design, there are no hard rules. Like, no one's gonna walk by your container and say, oh my God, she forgot whatever, they did this. But these are things, if you feel like, I want some structure to work with. Okay. Oh, well, now we're back one. Color. I think color is really the most important thing. I mean, you already have done your homework, you know, if you need sunny plants or shady plants or a mix, you know, part sun. A color wheel is kind of handy, or at least keeping it in mind what works together. And there's a lot of ways to combine the color. There we go. You know, the primary, but also secondary, and, you know, breaking it up like these. It's also pretty sometimes to just do a series like that. When it's, you know, this hue, tint, and shade, they're basically, I got to say the shade and the hue look the same. But in theory, that's, you know, the standard color, a lighter version, maybe like pastels, and then a deeper, darker version, like a maroon instead of a red. Generally, I would say even more, as much as color can matter, hue matters, or tint. Like if you're doing all pastel stuff, you don't want like a really screaming red or orange in with your pale yellows. You want something in the same tone. Sometimes something a little darker, you know, can add some interest, but you don't want to be, you know, really going off. Okay. These are just examples. Better there. Okay. This one's a bit more, you know, the reds and some purples in here. And then this one is actually sort of primary because I've got that red in there at the bottom. It's really orange. So it was more like the analogous, or not analogous. Will this work backwards? No. All right. Okay, it's more like the split complementary there. The blue and then a blue and then sort of a yellow, a golden and an orange kind of color. You can fudge. Anyway, all right, back to that one. Go ahead, back. Okay, with this one, if we hadn't done blue, if we kept with yellow or you know, orange or something, it would have been very pretty. And I wish I could show you what that would look like, but I'm not really great at Photoshop. But it makes a big difference when you add that sort of opposite color. It just brings everything to light. I think a little bit more. I used to not really think about opposite colors like blue and orange. I mean, that just wasn't in my headset. And when I started working in this business and I worked with a woman who did do all those great colors, it was amazing to me. You know, it's a different dynamic. Okay, next one. All right, color and light. In the shade, you actually really want to go with the tinted colors, the lighter colors, because in the dark shade, those light colors show better. You can see white is actually one of the stronger colors in the shade. So it's a great one to work with, but even pastels of almost anything, or kind of that neon, you know, chartreuse or a yellow. In the harsh sunlight, like the middle one, you want bright, vibrant colors, really rich and deep, because that harsh sun kind of washes them out. So again, you can play with this, but that's just sort of a rule of thumb. Okay, next one. Okay, here it is. Thriller, filler, spiller. So this is sort of the standard phrase for how you design a container pot. You have something tall that kind of adds some drama or height. You fill it in the middle. Actually, that's usually where more of the fun is. It's the different plants, the mix of colors, and then you have something trailing. I will say, that's great. It's helpful. And you do want a certain amount of height to the pot. I would say you want your plants to be at least about, you could be as short as half, but really for a pot this size, you want about 2/3 to, you could even go a little above a whole, a whole height in size, just to fill that, to make it seem proportional. But, and if you get way off, you can kind of see in these, I mean, some are a little bit like this one. This is going to fall over in a hard wind. That kind of, what they needed was a little bit bigger pot, and also in proportion, I would have said, if possible, it's not always possible, maybe some plants got a little taller. That just may not be possible. And then, some of these, they're just kind of oversized. Well, this one's really more of one. I don't mind this too much. I'd probably trim it a little bit. But this one with just a little bit, it really loses any kind of presence. It just kind of looks sad. This one too, it's very low. There, let's go to the next one. Oh yeah, I meant to try to find another example. I could, but you don't always have to do that. Like, I actually love this little pot, and it's very low, and you could even do that in a bigger pot. I've seen very modern looks where it's all just like moss across it, or something very intentional, very whatever. You don't want it to look like it's a mistake. You want it to look intentional. And usually it's going to be a modern looking pot for that to work, but you can do it. Okay, next one. Oh, I was really fast on that one. Okay, so for me, it's really about color a little bit, balance, how big, how little, and sort of the spiller, filler, thriller. I mean, you could have one beautiful blooming azalea, let's say. You don't necessarily need to put anything else in a pot that's a beautiful spring pot with that color. I mean, azaleas are great. But if we're talking multiple things, there's something about that. Also, color, there's kind of a rule that one color should dominate the pot, and then one or two other colors should be supporting. A 50-50 of color makes it, I think, a little bit fights with the eye. It's going back and forth. Whereas if you have like purple with a little bit of white and a little bit of yellow, it's sort of, they all work together, but it's almost to glorify the purple in that case. So you can do all different colors though. You could break that rule and just do one of everything. We kind of call that like the Skittles color version. And that can be pretty, in that case, you want to do all the same intensity of color, especially. It works great with bright colors, but you can do it with pastels too. Okay, any questions? Yes.
So if you're planning on the pot lasting 3 months before you change it out, what about spring bulbs? How can you incorporate some of them?
Yeah. Well, you put.
Question.
Oh yeah. How do you incorporate spring bulbs into a container? Well, you might want to put those spring bulbs in if you're going to do something for the winter, so that they're already in there, because by spring, what they're showing you is already blooming and they don't last very long. So that would be my first thing. I think you could plant bulbs as late as January. Now tulips have to be refrigerated for 6 weeks. Rarely are they refrigerated when you buy them at the nursery, so those you may want to buy earlier. There's Color Blends, I think online does refrigerate them for you. I mean, they're in the East Coast, they're not a bad price if you're getting enough to ship them. You may want to go in with a neighbor. They're actually a pretty good price, but they will refrigerate because it's hard to find room in your refrigerator for like 100 bulbs and 100 bulbs does not go as far as you think. For a container, if you're adding other things, I would not fill it with bulbs under there and plant all over. I would have maybe an intentional location in the middle or front middle where the you put some and you plant around it, and as they come up, maybe they bloom early. You can do one or two things. You could pull them out when they're done, but see if you can transplant them in a pot you don't care about, because if you want them to work the next year, they need to die back naturally. The leaves need to go from green to brown. You can't just cut them off. They won't have the energy for next year. Or if you don't care, you can, one, take them out, put something in, or two, cut them down and hope that whatever you've planted, let's say here, has bloomed up. For example, violas are pretty good. They start, lower, or petunias. We start to see petunias earlier and earlier every year. And after this is done and you've taken it and it's been removed or laid down or whatever, these have all kind of filled in that space. So that's kind of what I would do. Not plant on top of it because then it gets messy and it's hard. Or you could do a pot of all bulbs, have them come up. It's beautiful. I might do that with a drop-in. I might do that with a plastic one, like from the nursery, put it in, do your bulbs, put some moss, moss, like the Spanish moss or whatever over it. Once they bloom, pull it out, plant your spring stuff. I mean, that's actually, we do something similar for a client. And then I take those pots and I put them in the backyard, and then they're good for the next year.
So for a pot that size, how big would the drop-in pot need to be? And again, would you want to put an inverted plastic pot under it to elevate?
It's sort of what they call MacGyvering it. If you could get more of an azalea or camellia pot, which is wider than taller, that's probably better, and it might be a 6-7 gallon pot. Otherwise, you might need a 10-gallon pot, but then you're just going to cut it off, which we do all the time. Cut the plastic down to the right height. So that's, and then we'll have at the bottom, because it's narrow down here, we'll have, pots like this upside down to hold the pot up. It's a little bit of learning by doing. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Installation. Next. Okay. So you go to the store and it has a tag, and it's, I must have some tags here somewhere. It says something like full sun, part sun, and who knows what that means. It says sun, part shade. That's technically 3 different levels of sun exposure. So yeah, you have to figure that. You have to read them. It'll talk about watering, height. So full sun means at least 6 hours. A lot of people think, oh, I have clients who are like, I get a couple of hours in the summer. Well, that's not full sun, and that's not full sun in the spring. So think about, are you really getting 6 hours? 4 to 6 is part sun. I think you could go 3 to 6 for part sun. Part shade, you need still a little direct sun. full shade is not completely dark. It's hard, you've got trees and there's no sun. When they talk about full shade, they think either there's a little bit of dapple sunlight coming through, or maybe there's a building across the way that's white and it reflects the sun, or their windows reflect the sun. I've seen that also help the plants. So you just want to know what the tag means. Next one. And then annuals versus perennials. So what's the difference between an annual and a perennial? An annual is something that grows quickly. I mean, their job is to produce as many flowers and seeds to propagate their species. And they're like the little hamster on the, trail thing, the circle. So things like alyssum, impatiens, pansies, lobelia, some of those, they're annuals in that then they die when the weather changes. Some of them reseed, so you may feel like, they aren't annuals, but they might, just keep coming back and coming back. A lot of what we consider annuals, now that we're as warm as we are, almost last all year. They may not look great. Violas, especially in the sun of summer, will look really ragged. And they may even crisp in full hot sun. But if you cut them back and water them, they may come back. Generally with pots, you want it to look nice and clean all the time. But if you've got a place in your yard or somewhere that you put those. Perennials are things a little bit stouter. They should live the whole year, or for many years. 3 to 5, I think they say, although they can live longer than that. Things like a rudbeckia, black-eyed Susan, or Gerber daisies, or, these are heuchera, these little coral bells things. They kind of in the winter, this is sort of the winter time. They get a little sparse and then they send out flowers and then they fill in with foliage and get bigger and bigger. Those are perennials. And you may want a perennial as your, some of your bigger plants, and maybe you plant around it for several seasons, or even a shrub. I mean, technically, that lime yellow guy is a choicea. It's a Mexican mock orange. There are a lot of things called mock orange. I know 3 different things, so don't use that word when buying something. You may not get what you think you're getting. Try to find the Latin word for it. That turns into a huge bush, but its new growth is bright yellow. It's fun in a pot for a while until it gets too big. Those other things are all pretty much, well, there's Bacopa in there that actually looks really happy, but there's those are violas that are annuals and some other things, and you can see they're the ones that just really go crazy. Okay, next one. Oh, and leave it here, but on perennials, something like a agora, which is it's not a butterfly bush, but some people think of that. It's tall and it has little white or pink flowers that kind of wisp in the sun, and you'll see it everywhere. Something like that blooms a long time, but some perennials only bloom, or small shrubs only bloom for a very short time. An azalea, like a little azalea tree, is a fun thing to have in a pot for spring, but once it's bloomed, it's done. You can get the double blooming ones now. They bloom in the spring and the fall. The first bloom is usually the best. The second bloom is less, but you get more, more blooms. So you just want to know how long the bloom time is before you pick something up and you have a vision that it doesn't match. When you go, you want to look for, pretty much what's there. I don't know what I wanna hear. That you're not gonna go around and, well, sometimes I do. If I think it's really root bound, I might squeeze to see how hard the resistance is. This has a few roots coming out the bottom. That doesn't bother me too much. Smells like dirt. If you smell sulfur or rot or something, you don't want that because that rot's already come through. I don't see any, pests. There's a little dirt here. Everything looks happy. It didn't go through some stressful time. These are the colors it should be, not too light, not too whatever. My attitude is we're all good at killing them. So let's start with something that's really healthy to begin with. Yeah. I still kill things. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time and I'm, shocked at what happened. If you're really concerned about the roots and it's small, you can kind of, take a peek. I don't, right here see anything. Down below is a little snug, but I'll show you what we do when we go to plant something like this. And you do want to see signs of new growth, buds coming, etc. Okay, next one. When you're going to look for your flowering plants, for annuals, if they're already in bloom, like these violas, which I know are going to bloom and bloom and bloom, I'm not too worried about it. But this is a perennial. This is an osteospermum, which sometimes they call an African daisy, but they call other things African daisy. So it's an osteospermum. A few open blossoms is fine. And I see lots of small buds because this is going to do one big, beautiful flush. And you can trim it back. In the summer, it limps along. And then in the fall, again, it will bloom. So you don't want to have lost most of that great big flush that goes on for quite a while. You want something with lots to anticipate. And depending on how, especially depending on where in the season we are, if you're at the end of spring or summer, like right now, let's say if you saw cyclamen still out there, there's some pretty pinks and purples. Well, one, they aren't probably going to last very long. They like the cooler weather, but also if you found a new one, didn't have a lot of buds coming up, it's probably not going to do enough to get your money's worth. So you want to look at what's too young to be worth your time. Things that are in nurseries aren't always out at the time they should be planted. They're out at the time that people will buy them. So when you see tomatoes like next month, probably, or, February, end of February, that's not the time to plant tomatoes. Now, if you see a variety you love and you've got a little greenhouse or sunny spot in your house and it's not a big tomato plant, you could do that until it's time to put it outside, but you need to keep that in mind. I find independent nurseries pretty knowledgeable if you ask them that bloom time or how long, what's going to happen with this. But just keep that in mind because it's very tempting sometimes. They will also sell things sometimes like impatiens when it might be too cold to put them in. And because I don't have it elsewhere, impatiens are going to start to show up in March. We never know if we're going to have a cold, wet March or a warm, dry March. If you're in a protected area and it doesn't get too cold at night, you could try some impatiens in March. We will do that, but if you're out in the weather, I would wait until April at least. Also, cold travels down. So if you're across from like a hill or a slope at night, you may not think it gets that cold, but the cold's coming down the hill. Your neighbor's house might be here, across the street, and to your front door. So that's actually a place where it's a cold sink. It might get a little colder than you planned. But yeah, impatiens are great. Actually, impatiens last for 6 months at least. They'll go to November. Yeah, the bigger ones, the New Guinea or the sun patients, which you really don't want 8 hours of direct sun, but they take a lot of sun, will last till almost November, depending on our weather. And so they're great and you will start to see them, but you don't want to do it too soon. Okay, next one. Oh, back one. Okay, this is sort of what we just talked about. You don't want anything where you see a bunch of disease on it. Even if, you know, you might see something where it's all crinkly or whatever, but you can't find the bug. Maybe they've sprayed it and the bug is gone. If it's one leaf, that's one thing. If you see it on a lot of it, I would pass. Same with so many roots that it's already stressed, because you're gonna have to cut those roots and tease it, and that's more stress. Also, if you're buying a tree of some kind, a camellia is a great tree, or a lemon or whatever for your pot to be the centerpiece, you want to watch roots that are going circular around it, because eventually as they grow, they can choke it and it won't get its circulation. I know you want it. I'm a sucker. It's what I had in my heart, but you'll find something else or you'll find it at a different nursery. So unless you're really good at nursing, if you're an experienced gardener, you may take the risk and say, I know what I think I need to do. That's what I'll do. Okay, next. You want to use potting mix for your containers. You don't want to use garden soil. Garden soil has pathogens, pests, it's too heavy. You want pot mix that drains well, but also can hold some moisture, has some organic contact in it. I like organic, or they're organic / natural in there. Some of them have that mycorrhizal fungi, probably not as much as they claim, because it's probably died in the pot a little bit, or in the bag, but still those help the roots get nutrition to the plant. So, you know, it's a good thing to have. Some of the amendments, you don't see it advertised as much anymore, but had water retention materials like coconut core, or for a while, yucca juice or something. Maybe a coconut core can help, but I wouldn't want a pot full of coconut core. If you're doing something that needs a lot of nutrition, tomatoes, let's say you're doing vegetables, you can add a little bit of compost in the top, but if you add too much compost, this gets sticky and like silty mud, and it doesn't drain well. So you only want to put, you know, a little bit on the top and work it in. I use I do not like the ones with fertilizer in them. They aren't necessarily the best fertilizer. And let's go to the next one. But basically, potting soil is all you need, except next slide.
Oh, I think yours was working. Go ahead.
Oh, it is now? Okay. Oh, there we go. Acid planting mix. If you're doing blueberries, azaleas, camellias, there are a few other things. You do want to get some acid planting mix. It's not potting mix, but you could either use just it or some mixed in with your planting mix, your potting soil. They sell succulent cactus things. I don't love it. So I would do either potting mix And then maybe add a little extra drainage with something perlite, lava rocks, something so it drains a little bit more. But or if you've got some succulent cactus mix you already bought, I mix in some potting soil with it. It just drains so fast that all of a sudden the water's gone, and they don't want to sit in a lot of water, but they want a chance to have seen the water go by. Okay. Nope.
No, it's not.
Okay. Rocks, this whole idea of putting rocks at the bottom to increase drainage is a fallacy. It actually makes it harder for it to drain. There's a surface tension thing, the difference in porosity or whatever. The water comes down and all of a sudden there's these big open spaces. The water stays in that dirt. It doesn't actually drain. It kind of stays wetter there than you would think. So you don't want to put rocks in. You don't want to put anything down there for drainage. If you have a tall pot and you don't want to fill it all with potting soil, two things. You have to worry about it tipping over if you put something lightweight down there. I might put something heavy, a big old rock, a big old brick, something to hold it. You can do two things. You can get a black nursery pot and set it on top of your bricks or whatever. Or you could put something in and then lay down like landscape fabric, something that drains. You don't want to do just plastic. Put it so it comes, it's down in, but comes up the sides. Put dirt in for what you need. 8 inches, 12 inches. 12 inches is, I think, good. And then you can just plant there. The plants and that soil will act naturally. It won't retain all that moisture. Okay, let's see. No. Yeah, no. No.
Wait.
No, you still.
No,
Not sure.
screen
Oh.
share is paused.
Okay, share again.
Next one.
Next one. Fertilizer. So
Oh, it's still paused.
Still fine.
Okay.
organic fertilizer is what I prefer. Okay. There is two kinds. I mean, there are a lot of kinds. And I've been told by people in the business that, you see your choice of 10 different fertilizers from the same brand. They do that because you will buy it, not because you need it. So you probably need one that's all purpose. If you fertilize your garden, it's probably for bushes and general things. One that's sort of a blooming one, for vegetables, flowers, whatever. Possibly one for acid-loving plants. And the whole thing about acid-loving plants is they can only access nutrition at a certain pH in the soil. So, when it's alkaline, even if there's nitrogen, calcium, whatever, they can't absorb it. So there's that. I also like these starter ones. If you're doing this a lot, they have something called humic acid, which really is like Gatorade for the system. So it really helps get them going. Okay, next. This is an example. You can see we planted here, and then a few months later, how much that exploded there. And no, that's not, yeah, there may have been, and I can't tell in that, we did some ranunculus in that backyard, and they were the highlight early on, but then, they petered out, and then everything else came in. And what's good, next one. What's good about organic fertilizer is it feeds the soil as well as the plants. It keeps it healthy. So planting, you're gonna water all the plants before they go in. If they go in dry, for some reason, there's a lot of air bubbles, it's hard for them to really absorb moisture. You're gonna loosen roots. And for things like annuals, hoping I have something really tight. No, I don't. Well, let me see what's here. The first time a gardener showed me this, I was horrified. But let's say it was like this with the white all the way around. It's not really, it's pretty loose there, so I wouldn't be as aggressive. But you could, if it had a fair amount of roots, you could literally, you know, rip off the bottom third. Now you've got all these loose places for it to make contact with the new soil. It won't get root bound. And then you want to make sure it has good contact with the soil, so everything gets pushed down a bit. And then you want to, pardon me?
I think the daisies are a little root bound.
Yeah, my daisy is root bound. Now, being not an annual, but a perennial, I'm a little less, I don't rip half of it off because those things are like Mighty Mouse. But I would probably try to, as you see, loosen it like this. Fingers are an important tool in gardening. Although you could also use, I have a hoary knife somewhere, or, you know, pruners, and just kind of do this. I mean, you can be harder than you think usually. If something has big juicy roots, like thick, those plants are more sensitive to transplanting than something with the typical sort of white. But these are white. I mean, these look good, they smell good. I might pull it out a little more, and I've lost a few. But if you lose a lot of roots on something that's not an annual, for something you had an accident, you might want to cut off some of the top so that it has enough roots to support what's there, that it's in balance. Okay, and when you plant, you really want to start in the center or the back, one or the other, and then center out or back forward. It's much easier that way than having the outside and then trying to get into the middle. Okay. Next one. Watering. If you're going to water by hand, it's great. You know when there's a problem with your plants. You know when they're wet or dry, you can use a meter. You could also just use your finger, and you want to wait till when you first plant, I'd say after the first inch is dry, I give them a little water because they drain quickly. It's not like in the yard with all our clay soil. But once they've been in a month or so, you could wait till they get down a couple inches and then water them again. I don't know how often that's going to be. In the winter, sometimes it's every 2 weeks or 3 weeks. If it's been like this, sometimes it's once a week because we've had some nicer weather. But you want to keep the pressure low and the water down. You don't want it up here. I mean, if you did a sprinkle thing in the morning, that's okay. You have a nice gentle sprinkle. But generally, it's the splashing water that either displaces a small plant, or more in the garden than here, at least in the beginning, it's how pathogens come up onto the plants. The water splashes and pathogens are in the dirt, and then that disease gets on the leaves. So it's better to do it this way. Okay, next one. Okay, irrigation. If you do drip irrigation, I prefer, and it's convenient, you can put it up the middle, do it around. I like emitters that are every 6 inches because I've got multiple things in here. So I like it to go around, maybe even in a spiral. Urban Farmers. They're in San Francisco, but their website is great. They have a lot of good information. Sometimes Master Gardeners will hold a class, so you should check their websites for the county you're in. Yeah. Okay, next one, because I know we're running late. This is the most important thing you will ever learn about container gardening. If you put the dry soil repels water, it's hydrophobic. When a root ball dries out, there's air in there, like in my little picture here, in the middle there. You water and it's running out the bottom, and you're like, oh, well, this must be fine. It's got plenty of water. But what it's doing is it's going down the sides. If you suspect your plant's not doing well, the water's coming out fast, it's probably dry in the middle. And that takes some effort. You've got to move some of the soil. You don't have to move it a lot if there's a bunch of plants. Maybe poke a stick, a chopstick, a little bamboo stick in a couple places. Put some water in. You might see if you see little puffs, you definitely have a very dry thing. But even still, you do that, you let it absorb some of the water. You got to do it again, maybe a couple different new places you poke holes. You kind of have to keep doing that until you're pretty sure you've got it wet. Because it's not just a matter of I'm going to pour a bunch of water on top. It's just going to keep going out the sides, and nothing inside will get wet. Okay, next one. If you have a gardener and he puts one of these kind of sprinkler heads in your pot, I'm not in love with either of them, because this one, maybe if it was in the middle, might get everything. These kind, oh sorry, well, this kind, it only gets one section, and usually you'll find these in your garden shooting right at the trunk of something, which is not where it needs its water. It needs it out on its root ball. If you shoot water at your trunk, you're going to get crown rot. It's bad for them. And one little source of water is not enough. I mean, if you need to do something like this, you should have like 3 of them gently getting some water out there. Okay, next one. If you've got something in for a long time, you do want to check periodically if there's aphids or snails or whatever. A lot of these things can be treated quickly and easily. Sometimes it's just like with aphids, wearing some gloves and taking a gentle hose and just kind of washing them off. I generally don't use insecticides too often, just because there's healthy plants there too, bugs there too. The bees are coming, or sometimes the hummingbirds. After 2 months of planting, because we're watering this and some of it's going out, you need to fertilize again. Especially if you're going to keep this for a while. And then you may need to rotate the pot. If you've got, as you can see, this one that's lopsided. If you've got something you're keeping in for a while, yeah, you want to be rotating it maybe every quarter, every 6 months, whenever you think about it. Okay, next one. We're almost done. Oh, these are just, so these are a different kind of osteospermum. They're really fun this time of year. This was maybe in April, early April. There's some petunias. That is something called Nemesia, which is a great, I don't know if it's an annual perennial, and then some alyssum up there. This one was earlier, and you're going to start to see those hydrangea, like florist hydrangea. They will work for a while. You want to make sure you have tight buds if you hope to have it for a while. If it's already all in bloom, you're just going to have it age in place. And hydrangeas can age in place in a nice way, but spring isn't usually the time we like that. So if one's in bloom, but it's got 2 more coming out, that would be great. Whatever they're planted in, it's like fibrous something, because really it's like 3 different plants. They've cut a branch, put root stuff on it and stuck it in. It's not one plant, usually. You want to make sure you get water in that little thing. That can be a little tricky, but once it's watered, it's happy. And they're good for a few months. Let me see, any more? I'm not sure. I didn't have a lot. Oh, for the shade. And I did bring some plants. So these are north face, that's north facing. That one's maybe east facing, but it's got like a redwood and a deep porch, so it doesn't see any sun. You could use some indoor plants. This is a Schlafera. This is a tuberous begonia. I love tuberous begonias. These are bromeliads. I also use those a lot in the shade. And then this was a bigger florist hydrangea, which they didn't water well. So one did well and one died. But yeah, you don't have to just have outdoor plants. You can use indoor plants outdoors. And when it's warmer in the summer, you could use them elsewhere. Ooh, now that worked. I only, because this isn't a Master Gardener talk, I'm not going to give you the whole spiel, but these 3 bugs, the first 2 are actually a ladybug in its middle stage, nymph, soldier beetle. They both eat tons of aphids. I mean, they're not pretty looking, and you might think, well, they're ugly, they're bad. But this cute little yellow ladybug and the one with the stripe, they're rotten devils. They not only eat, but they spread disease, and they love certain vegetables, but they will, like beans and zucchini and stuff, but sometimes they hit your plants. So inspiration, I used to say the public library, which I still love, the independent nurseries. Nowadays, social media will keep you busy forever. On Instagram, there are container gardeners now who kind of have an association. So if you're really interested in what some of them are doing, you could find them. It's called Digging In. Sometimes that's hashtag digging in. You can then find the person to find their thing. Anyway, okay. So I was going to plant. I know we're way out. So if
We have a question. From
Yeah.
Someone.
Yeah.
It's on there.
Guinea pig poop. I've never used guinea pig poop or any animal poop, but you would have to age it for a while. You don't put any sort of animal manure, cat, horse, whatever. It's it burns plants. So that is something to ask somebody who they could ask master gardeners, because there are people who specialize in compost. They would send an email to them. There'll be a where to connect, to ask help. Any other?
No, that was.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, no, I was just.
Oh,
gonna help you.
okay. If you guys have to leave, I'm not offended, but I did want to show you some of my thinking. So for shade, I'll take that one. Well, these are okay. These are both kind of for shade, and I don't know which one I'd use. They would be great. Well, really, they'd probably be great in either pot. But this is a kind of begonia. It's got double blossoms. You don't see this, do you there? Okay, I have to come over here so people can see it. Okay. And, when I went to think that really wants more shade, it can take some sun. It probably says it can take more sun. But I would keep it in the partial, which means I could I'm going to look for some things that are of similar tones to the leaf. I mean, I was kind of going more with these kind of things. Let me get some more. But I want it to pop a little. And so I would probably do these and I don't know. Maybe I would do something with these. So I'm not gonna take these all out because we don't have time, but you can kind of imagine, this actually might be my, oh, can you do it over here or no?
Yeah, well,
Okay, this probably isn't big enough to be my thriller. So maybe I would put something like this, which actually is not that root bound. Usually these are terribly root bound and you just abuse them. So I might put it, and I wouldn't necessarily put it, they don't have to be symmetrical. And then you'd have that there. Let me move this over here for the moment. And then I wouldn't put all my dark stuff together and all my bright stuff over here. That just wouldn't, you know, appeal to the eye. I'd probably put a heuchera back here. It's going to send these little blooms. I broke this one, but there's a couple more, so you'd have some pretty flowers. It's going to fill out. I would probably, oh, primroses are great. And primroses, okay, this is root bound. Primroses send out tons of roots and they go deep. So, do you see a thing that looks like a knife? Oh, I moved it over here. That's okay. I just use these and, you know, tear them apart because these are really good growers. They are happy in the spring and the late fall. You know, they kind of go through the winter. We'll plant them in the winter. Oh my God. All right. Well, for the sake of time, primroses are great to use. There are a couple of different varieties, which I will pull real quick. You can get rid of the yellow leaves. They have so much energy. And what happens with them, if you're not familiar, this kind sends up a flower. This is the typical kind. And there are a lot of buds underneath here. So as one of these starts to look bad, you just, you know, take it off and you get more. When they're all done, you would just cut or snap this off and you can tell more are coming because the next whirl of leaves here, can you guys see those leaves? Means the next one's coming. And sometimes it's coming when the other one's not. This is something you could then probably put in your yard if you didn't want to. But now that I've got all this dark here, I need to put something light, which is lower at the moment, but it wouldn't be. It would cover the height so that I'm not short, you know, it would make a nice slope here. And then maybe I would have, okay, we'll do the thriller, filler, spiller. I'd have my bacopa, but then maybe I know that viola is gonna do great over there, and maybe I put more of the same color here. And the two whites, I only have two whites, but I think, I mean, that, you know, I know this isn't the,
Looks pretty all right.
so yeah, and then it's going to keep going and get bigger. This will last all summer. Now, when you're doing your pot, yeah, it depends on where you're doing it. You need to remember the back because sometimes even it's you know, you planted it on your front doorstep, but you can see it from the living room or some window. You want to see the back. So that's something to consider. And then I wanted to show, let me see. Well, I have so many things to show you. That's the problem. Let me show you a few things and then I'll try to do one more thing.
Okay.
But, I don't have a whole, this, if I was going with a protected area that was warm enough, I don't know if I would have done this instead of the whites or even the reds, but these are begonias that really you just buy for the foliage. They do not like this cold, damp weather. I have this inside at the moment, but it does get beautiful. I mean, it is beautiful. It stays beautiful in the shade, in the warm weather, and you can put it with silvers and whites, you can put it with some pale blue, but since it's a shade thing, you could be using things like hubris can handle shade for a while, pretty long time. Here's an example of some indoor plants that don't necessarily go with this, but a small schlafera you can buy, or a peperomia. These are great. These are actually very low water that come in here. And this is cool. This is these are sort of cool toned things. You don't have a lot of yellow in them, which makes them go to, together better. Even this yellow is what we'd call a cool yellow. So these are some of the things we use a lot. Other things that I think are great for a shady place, because I think shade is the hardest, especially if it's before impatient season, it's kalanchoe or kalanchoe, and both are correct. So it's technically a succulent. So you don't want to overwater it. They bloom a very long time, especially when it's cool. You want one with some blooms. It will hold that for months. Then as it gets warm, it puts out more and more. Eventually the blooms stop. You pinch off all of these, and then it's going to make new growth and get bigger. So you may not want to keep it in your pot, but you might want to keep it. Could stay indoors. It could go somewhere else. I didn't have a pretty color one. They come in pink and white and yellow, and this is a single, but there are some that look like roses, little roses that are so pretty. These are great. Here's a this is an older bromelia that I've had from Christmas. They only need a little water in it, and I use those all the time in the shade, summer, winter. They handle pretty well. And then let me just do a different, but I will tell you one thing. I wouldn't put this in this pot, because this is kind of an orangey terracotta pot. I don't think it highlights it as well as if it were, I don't even know if I could make a difference with it. You see how with the blue, because those are all cool, that makes a better pot for that. For this, I might do obviously yellow. It's kind of fun. Get my daisy in there. Now I don't know that this guy is worthy of, he is worthy, but the right form. These are euphorbia. They come in a dark sort of merlot, plain green, a pale green and white, which is really pretty. And then this is called ascot. And you'll see this at the nurseries, usually in a 1 gallon. They have really pretty leaves, and then as it comes to spring, they get these, some people think they look alien, but they open these little bracts that are like yellow with a little red dot in the middle. They're really pretty. They're really low key. They work not only with, something, let's do something, I was going to say, like that. And then depending on what I had there, I don't know if I would put blue or not. I don't think I would, because that blue doesn't quite hold the character of the bright yellow. So I'd probably go on to some white, or this is another kind of primrose. I don't think it's as sturdy as the white ones. I think its roots are more gentle, but it's a different kind. It sends out these little things all over the place, and it could be a sweet thing in there, and you could put some white, and I'd probably put another white over here. Last thing, if you don't have enough plants, or you know, it's a hard place, or you don't know what you want, you can do something like, not all of these. Generally, you work with 3, 5, 6, although they're also branchy. Take a few. And neither of these pots are right for it, but let's say I didn't have anything and all I had were the yellow and the white. I could, you know, I don't know about these, but if I had enough of them, you could do that. Or pussy willows, which you're starting to see now. I get no money for saying this, but at the moment, Trader Joe's has the best ones. You know, they're a very pretty spring look. And then I did there was 1 or 2 pictures to make them almost like an Easter basket or something. And so, you know, there's a lot of fun things we also do this time of year. I might put this around, it's not quite the right size, but around to make it look like a nest. Or this one's too small, but I think this one would be really cute with like these guys and, you know, and some violas or something with it. So there's lots of opportunity to have fun. You don't have to just have plants. Now, you can have glassware, you can do whatever you want as long as you enjoy it. You can have all of one plant. You can have all primroses or all pansies. And if you like that, I mean, that's pretty. I don't want to knock that you have to have something made. That's lovely. It's really just mostly about what you like, what you're going to take care of. So, any questions? Yes.
Links those soils that you plant yourself, the potting soil.
You know, I don't use that because I have to carry bags of it around. That's not convenient for me. I would talk to them. I know that for tomatoes in pots, they had, I don't think it was their basic potting soil. They had one they really thought did well. I kind of like, I think it's a little loose for me. I'm sure, I mean, I adore Linkso. I think their products are great. You know, I know Terry Linkso. I know it's done with integrity and honesty and good quality. Their compost is amazing. They have a lot of good products, but I kind of felt like their potting soil wasn't right for what I wanted. It drains, maybe it's, you know, it might be good if you were putting a big tree in a pot for its drainage. I always want, because I have lots of small things, it to help hold a bit more water. And you'll see, I packed this pretty tight because it's not living forever. I mean, even 6 months, you know, and it all kind of goes together. And you want things for the most part that need the same sun exposure, the same fertilizer, the same water. I wouldn't put something acid loving in with things that don't like it. Have put succulents in, sometimes a big aeonium or some sedum, but then you're just careful in your watering. I know I'm way over.
That's okay. No, you're fine.
Okay.
Are there any questions on
No,
Zoom?
Pat, there are
No, okay. Any other questions?
I'm happy to stay if you have something you want to talk about, but not at the moment.
Yeah, if you have a specific question, yeah, we want to thank Laurel for the great presentation, and I'm sure we're all inspired now to go home and start working on our own pots.
Yeah, it's fun.
And Yeah, I want to also thank Kevin and Archana, our Zoom people. We have quite a few people on Zoom. Just one last thing, if you have any interest in volunteering, we can always use volunteers, both in the nursery or working on seminars. We'd be happy to have somebody help with that. Community outreach and publicity. So if you have any interest, go on our website or you can talk to one of us. And yeah, thanks again, everybody. And yeah, the program's now finished.
Thank you.
And if you, yeah, she said she'll stay if you have specific questions. So
Yeah. Okay, have a good day. Yeah.